What's up, everybody? It's been a minute, but we're back with more Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Got a new solo gate. Also made a couple of cards that unlocked, and definitely made some headway with my Blackwing deck. Finally got Gale the Whirlwind, Zephyros, and Chris the Crack of Dawn. Chris the Crack. And oh, I got this little, I don't know if you call it Ghost Ultra Rare Foil. I don't know. I'm just gonna call it Crystal card because pretty much it's, you know, like crystallized holographic full armor master. So that's dope. So yeah, nice little thing. I mean, like, you know, some alterations with Yuya's deck. I like Supreme King Gates, as you probably already know. I got Supreme King Dragon. And don't I got any tuners here? Yeah, I got a few tuners. One. All right. Only one tuner, but that's fine. Anyway, I want to check out the new solo mode. They introduced like the Vendreds, but I'm kind of interested in trying out the deck, to be honest with you. Pretty much like a full-on legit zombie specific archetype. We had like, you know, various, you know, zombie stuff like the vampires, but it's like straight up zombie, and it's pretty much like, think of like based off the Resident Evil stuff. That's pretty much what the Vendreds are. The horror began when the city was shrouded in darkness. The Vendred are a race that increased in number as they attacked the living. While everyone else was gripped by despair, one man was compelled by vengeance to take a stand against the undead, even after becoming one of them. Yeah, and this character in this picture is a new duel mate. And he looks pretty good. Got some lemonade here. Kind of hope I don't have to work on Halloween. I just want to spend all day just streaming. Oh, by the way, on the 22nd, that Saturday, I will not be streaming for that day because after class, I'll be going to a basketball game to watch the Bulls play against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So yeah, that's like 7 to 9-ish. And I'm probably gonna go, I want to, like, you know, go out to eat downtown because I haven't done so in such a long time. I think the last time was a couple of Halloweens ago when me and a friend of mine went to the booze cruise thing and then stopped off at a I forgot the name of the spot, but you know, to eat, and I grabbed a little more drinks because it's just like just chilling. Anyway, here we go. And you know, they mix the Vendreds. Some people like to mix the Vendreds with the Eldrix cards to make them effective. When Within the concrete jungle of high-rise buildings, the people hustled and bustled among the sleepless city lights. I'm kind of interested in trying out the Eldrix, but I want to probably mix it with the Vendreds, so I'm going to try to test that out. However, that was a long time ago. A darkness that shrouded the sky above turned the world into one that would never see morning come again. And with the darkness came monsters that threatened the peace of the city, the Vendreds. The Vendreds started as corpses that crawled out of their graves, except their bodies had transformed into something grotesque. Without a single shred of their memories from their past life, or any will of their own, they would wander the streets at night and attack any living human or animal in their path, guided only by their instinct. No firearm, tank, or any sort of modern weaponry could defeat these creatures. Shoot them in the head. What's worse, anyone and anything that was unfortunate enough to become a victim of a Vendred will become one themselves. I think that's very timely. They released a new gate, in around October, and it will be the Vendreds. The Vendred threat was like a match thrown into a forest, spreading fear like an uncontrollable blaze. As the undead continued to rapidly multiply, those remaining of flesh and blood scrambled fruitlessly for a solution. The Vendred horde soon made their way to the hastily built wall that served as the sole line of defense for the living. Kind of want to watch some Resident Evil now. The good stuff. I mean, the first two Resident Evil movies were pretty legit. Everything after sucked so much balls that wasn't, based off the animated, or at least one that wasn't the animated stuff based off the games themselves. I'm talking about the live-action Resident Evil live-action Resident Evil films. The first two were solid. The rest, yeah. Among them was a young man who had also lost his life to the undead. He was no different from the other Vendreds, wandering the same shrouded city with the same mindlessness. But, as luck would have it, one day, as the young man continued to drift about mindlessly, he came across a young woman who had been carried off by the Vendreds. His mind had already long faded, or it should have, but as his eye caught the locket that hung from the woman's neck, something stirred within him. Memories of his past life began to flood into his head in a great crashing wave. He knew the woman with the pendant before him. She had once been the love of his life. His mind twisted and turned with a desperate sadness as he realized that his love was no longer of this world. That sadness soon boiled over into a seething rage and hatred for the Vendreds that robbed her of her life. As his mind dragged itself out from the bogs of its undead depths, a flame of hatred ignited his heart. The violent burst of emotion tore his body apart with unbearable pain as it began to transform and rebuild itself into something much stronger. When the transformation ended, the man steadied his uneven breath and stood up. He took the locket and hung it around his neck so he could keep the memory of his beloved close by. Then, he spoke into the silent night. Smell my finger. I swear I will vanquish every last one of these walking corpses, if it's the last thing I'll do. Smell my finger. And thus, the new agent of vengeance was born. He was the Vendred who would hunt the other Vendred. Vendred Slayer. This was the beginning of the Lone Revenger's fierce battle. Even in that day, the living struggled bravely from within the city wall to keep alive. That's what happens when you didn't take your COVID vaccine. Get this crap. A Vendred horde that pursued the living pushed against the barrier like crashing waves, and showed no signs of ever stopping. Their numbers seemed to only be going up too. They continued to groan and wail. Deep into the night. Day after day, the terror was too much. The citizens were finding it harder and harder to keep sane under these horrific circumstances. But then, a single shadow loomed over the horde. The shadow darted forth and cut down a Vendred with a single swoop, quick as lightning. But he didn't stop there. Any Vendred that dared stand in his way would be stabbed, hit, kicked, and knocked down. They would have their limbs and rotted flesh torn, twisted, and ripped from their bodies. And once the shadow had finished hunting down every last walking corpse that plagued the city wall, he disappeared back into the darkness as quickly as he had appeared, not even sparing a single moment to look back at the crowd he had just saved. But the Vendred Slayer was not interested in being a hero. All he wanted was revenge, and he would not stop at anything to destroy any Vendred that entered his line of sight. But regardless of his intentions, the fact was that he had swooped onto the scene like a bolt from the blue and defeated all the Vendreds. To the survivors, he was their single ray of hope. Word of the mysterious undead hunter began to spread quickly through the city. As the nights continued, he, too, continued his battles. However, the Vendreds weren't going to stand for being hunted down so mercilessly. With the carnage, the undead began to change. Up until now, the humans and animals that turned into Vendreds had stayed about the same physical size as they had been when they passed. That was one of the main reasons the survivors had been able to keep the horde back with just their average human strength. However, now that the Vendreds were being pursued by a relentless executor in the form of a Vendred Slayer, they began to feel threatened. Some of them even began to merge with each other to create a bigger Vendred. Few words could describe how grotesque it looked, and people began to name it after a certain multi-headed beast of legend. They called it the Vendred Chimera. The creature would threaten the safety of the people beyond the wall for many more nights. It possessed the powers and strength of numerous Vendreds, and even the Slayer was beginning to have trouble fighting it. Every time they battled, the Slayer would only just manage to fight it off. He was never successful in completely silencing it. However, the more they fought, the more weaknesses were uncovered. The Slayer found that within the Chimera, there lay a core that governed all its actions. The Slayer charged at the core and threw all his strength into it, destroying it. And finally, the Chimera crumbled into a pile of rotting flesh and bones. At first, it seemed that the Slayer's do or die attack had ended things once and for all, with the agglomeration of animosity that was the Chimera. But the tragedy will only further unfold from here. What a word, agglomeration. That is one hell of a word. I never seen that word before in my life. What's the new word of the day? The clash of the undead will only escalate further and further into something beyond human comprehension. All the survivors could do was pray that one day the Vendred would be vanquished, and dawn would break once more over their city. It's a deck based around ritual monsters. If you choose a non-ritual Vendred monster on your field to tribute for a ritual summon, the ritual summon monster can gain additional effects. Assume the powers of the dead, and the Vendred will grow even stronger. If a Vendred monster such as Vendred or Hound Horde is tributed from the field to ritual summon, the ritual summon monster gains a special effect. The attack of the opponent's monster is 0, but be careful of the cards set in the opponent's spell and trap card zone. Okay. Summon Vendred Hound Horde. Love the animation. Okay. Excuse me. Shinobi Necro. It needs some more Vendred support though. I mean, it's more than what is showing in this game. I'm gonna try Joey's deck because the most iconic duel dealing with zombies was Joey's first duel against Bones, and that's the first time we actually were introduced to the whole theme of a zombie deck. Excuse me. Okay. You can send this equip card to the graveyard, then target one effect monster on the field. Still not enough. I'll keep it there just in case. Crap. Made that wrong choice. After a long and bitter struggle, Vendred's Slayer would finally destroy the Vendred Chimera threat. No one could predict that this defeat would only bring more dreadful threats. One day, the Slayer felt a menacing presence like never before, overflowing with an unabated grudge. He immediately headed toward it, determined to find the source. He saw that the wall had been broken through, even though it had held up well against the Chimera threat. The wall and the scavenged armored vehicles that were taking the brunt of the attacks were destroyed, and countless people were found slain. The Vendred horde had a different leader now. It was much larger than the Chimera had been, and was clad in heavy armor. Enveloping it was a thick and ominous aura of resentment. It was the Vendred Battle Lord, and had been born from the grudges of all the Vendreds that the Slayer had defeated. Their collective hunger for vengeance against the Slayer had combined into a frightening force, and wherever the Battle Lord went, it would leave a trail of death and destruction behind. It was one lone fighter's wish to eradicate the Vendred against the Horde's desire to crush their executioner. Their rage came to a head, and thus another clash to the death began. The Battle Lord's might was far more tremendous than the Slayer could ever have imagined. Not only could it absorb the surrounding Vendred, but also those who had lost their lives at the scene. The Battle Lord had a steady supply of fodder, and it only grew more powerful as time went on. No matter how strong the Slayer's desire for revenge was, his blade stood no chance against his foe. He pushed and tried everything he could to gain the upper hand, but in the end, he was overwhelmed by the Battle Lord's immense strength. Vendred Slayer lay limp on the ground, wounded and battered like he was a rag doll that had been flung aside. Vendred Battle Lord picked up the small hunter in its ominous hand. Then, just as it had done to the other Vendreds and the falling victims, it reached its other hand toward the Slayer's chest and absorbed his powers. The Slayer's consciousness was sinking into nothingness fast, but then the faint glint of his locket caught his eye. That tiny gleam was enough to remind him that his mission was not yet over. With his conviction renewed, the flame in his heart lit up once more. No wound on his body could stop him now. The power of love. The Slayer mustered all the strength he had left, and right before the Battle Lord could absorb his powers, he plunged his hand into the Vendred's chest and ripped out its core. Holding the core, the Slayer began to feel a new surge of energy. His body was absorbing the hateful power that the Battle Lord had possessed. The tides were turning, with the Battle Lord's powers flowing into the Slayer now. With the Battle Lord's powers flowing into the Slayer now, his body started to crumble. However, just as the Slayer began to think the fight was finally over, the core, struggling for survival, brushed against the Slayer's pendant with a stray hand. The Battle Lord's remains, along with the Vendreds that surrounded him, began to transform. They all began to take on the form of the woman that the Slayer had cherished in his previous life. With that single touch of the locket, the core had sensed the remaining dregs of the Slayer's love and sought to destroy his morale with it. The Slayer froze. Was this a dream? No, this was no dream. He shook his head, trying to remind himself that the love of his life was already gone. This was a nightmare that was trying to ensnare him. He balled his fist in anger. How dared this scum disgrace the memory of his beloved? As his burning rage surged and finally exploded, he found himself transforming into a new form with stronger powers. He had become the Vendred executioner. I'll try Yuya. It's been a minute since I tried Yuya's deck. Stargaze Magician and Time Gazer Magician. There we go. Boom. There you go. Fueled by his scorching hatred, the Vendred executioner swooped through the horde and cut down the false figures of his beloved, one after another. He had been fighting his foe for days that could no longer be continued all alone. And after absorbing the Vendred Battlelord, his grudge only grew bigger with his Vendred powers. He was barely being kept in balance with his human heart. His mind and body had long been pushed past their limits. It was already a miracle that he was able to exit with both life and death in one vessel. It didn't matter anymore if what remained of his humanity faded, or if his body fell apart. Nothing could stop him now. All he had on his mind was to fight and fight and fight. He threw everything he had into this single desire. Then, at long last, the Vendred horde moved no more. The battle had finally come to a close. The rays of the sun broke through the dark veil of the sky, illuminating the slayer. Just how long has this war raged on for? The city survivors squinted, unaccustomed to the bright light. But oh, what a joyous sight it was. No one ever thought they would see the end of those eternal nights. But here, the sun was in all its glory. The Slayer could feel his body fading with the light. He bent over to pick up the locket that had been taken from around his neck. All the Vendreds had been defeated, and the darkness that engulfed the city was gone. But at the end of the day, he too was a Vendred, and now it was his time to go. Now that the undead threat had passed, with the endless nights, the survivors were able to return to their peaceful lives. However, the grief of losing so many lives left an unamendable hole in their hearts. A lot of the survivors also developed a fear of the night and would be plagued by nightmares of the horrors they have faced. Unbeknownst to them, a single shadow washed over them from atop the glowing skyscrapers. Just like he had saved the city, the survivors had saved him. Although the Slayer had set out for revenge, he had still saved countless lives. They all celebrated him as their hero. They were able to hold on to hope because of this lone fighter. And as the Slayer was slipping into the darkness, on that fateful day, the survivors' kind hearts had pulled him back. Thus, he was able to remain in the mortal world without disappearing like the other Vendreds. If the world ever fell to darkness again, if monsters threatened the lives of the people again, he would surely swing his blade for them once more. But this time, without the resentment he once harbored in his heart. If that time ever came, he would fight not for vengeance, but for peace, and to give the people courage and hope when they needed it. Yeah, you got the vampire stuff. Let's I want to try out like this difficult mode using my better cards. Actually, we're gonna just start over. I never did like I mean, I tried once like a week after this game came out to try like the difficult stuff, but I really could not make it work. And I've been avoiding it since. Me playing around with you. Oh man, I goofed up. Look at the Link monsters don't switch in defense mode. Damn it! Gonna try again. He shouldn't have much left in his graveyard. It's unaffected by magic and trash, so I can't use it. Damn it. It's getting so close. God dang it. Probably should go with my Cyber Dragon deck. Okay, finally. All right. Well, we'll end the video here. I don't feel like, going to online right now. I just want to do like that solo mode and get that part out the way. But yeah, give me about like 10 minutes and I'll be hopping on to play some more Overwatch. So I will see you guys in a bit.